Hello everybody and welcome to the QandA. I said that in the description last week. That is Q&A typed out and then pronounced how it is typed. Anyway, hello everybody, welcome to another video. I feel pretty bad. I cannot believe a whole week has passed and we haven't done a video. So let's go with a Q&A. I guess it was really easy the past couple of weeks because they had so much news coming out about the feature pack, and little news has come out since then. The devs did do a Q&A themselves, but really there's been nothing major announced. Anyway, I wanted to do a Q&A for today. You guys had plenty of questions from the previous video, so let's get stuck into it. I will say much of the discussion was to do with the DPS meta and the prevalence of stacking, and I will reiterate, I do actually agree that stacking is a big problem. It does trivialize a lot of the content. Like, I was just running a RA before I began to record this video, and I was pointing out to a friend who was, you know, learning it on their first time through, oh, here's this boss, here's how this boss would work, except we're just stacking and killing them. Oh, here's this boss, here's how it would work, except you can put it over to this wall, and then none of the mechanics exist. Here's this boss, and it's got all these marks on the floor, except if you just stack here, it doesn't do anything. You know, that is a big problem, and I think a RA is a shining example of what could be interesting content that is completely ignored. I also do think that while you can say, oh, there's no point fixing it unless you get some big grand fix, there are also some very elegant small solutions the dev could implement. There are some enemies in the game that we see have AI that means if they get attacked in melee, they do a dodge roll backwards in, like, say, a random direction. That's there in the game on some mobs, and can you imagine how different the dungeon running experience would be if all mobs were like that? They were actively trying to dodge away from you. Even in the first game, when an enemy in hard mode detected it was stood in an AoE, they would scatter the hell all over the place, and so line of sighting in such a way really didn't work. However, all that said, I also find it immense fun critting for ridiculous amounts of numbers, buffing myself up super high and speeding through content by using those tactics. So for now, at least until I get bored of it, I suppose, and have ran all the other classes and get bored of those, I'm not, like, gonna complain too much. It's a bit two-faced, I agree. But the first question comes from Philip Conaway, who says, you may have already answered this, but what are your computer specs and or hardware settings? In nearly every video you post, I see textures and such are set to pretty high states, and you still seem to get high frame rates. I thought I had a pretty good setup, but I cannot run high or ultra settings like I believe you are. This is such a common question. It's actually answered immediately by looking at my channel, where just the information on there I've had posted. But for people to know, I run an i7-860. It's actually an aging CPU at this point, but it's clocked quite high. It's clocked at 3.5, which is quite nice. And the thing to consider with Guild Wars 2 is it is largely a CPU-bound game. It is not a particularly well-optimized game either. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because I've actually started running Sweet FX. I don't remember ever mentioning this on the channel. Maybe I have at some point, but I have begun to use this, and not only has it made the game look better, but it has increased my frames slightly. For those that don't know, one of the best descriptions I've heard of it from someone is that it's basically Instagram for Guild Wars 2. It sort of puts a filter over the game and takes away some of the processing your client tries to do itself, and it can really bring out a lot of colors and a lot of the art in the game. You can download just the core thing, and then you can get different presets from different people. The one I use in particular took a while for my eyes to get used to because it was a little bit harsher, but it brought out a lot of detail. Like, on my skill bar at the bottom of the screen, it really shows a lot more of the detail that's in the art there that I was missing before I started to run it. And as I say, it improves frames. So this is, I guess, my endorsement. This is me suggesting maybe have a look at Sweet FX. But also, I will let you know, my setup does not run Guild Wars 2 perfectly. If I try and do a Tequatl run where everybody pops embers on that final burn phase without, you know, with all settings maxed out and culling, I will go to 1 frame a second. I will go very, very low, and I will stick there. My game does cripple at certain times, but I've got my culling settings set just right, I think. And also, I think a lot of ArenaNet's effects they put in the game I don't enjoy, and so I get more FPS by just turning them off, and it looks better to me for that. For example, their FXAA I turn off, and I have my own anti-aliasing done in my graphics card, and I don't use the Guild Wars 2's version. Their depth blur I find marginally interesting at best, and often I have turned off. There are certain things that crisp up the image to me, and also give me frames. So yeah, that's sort of the story there. The next question is from Different Breed. This actually came from a mail in-game, and on that topic as well, while we're there, a lot of people send me questions as mails in-game. I gotta admit, I'm really bad with mails in-game. I'll read them, but a lot of the time they get pushed off by things, and I'll try and save it for a while before I go and type it off manually so I can put it in a video later, but then I'll be at 10 mails and I'll just start deleting stuff. So really, it's not the best place to go to, but this I thought was a pretty interesting question. Hey WP, especially since my dungeon running lately, Just rewatched your Scepter Focus Elementalist guide and was curious how you made the transition from the brawling sustain type dagger play to Scepter Focus. How does the play transition to PvP? Well, this is kind of an interesting story. For those that don't know, on my channel, I started at launch. I put my stuff away very quickly and I played mostly dagger, largely at the start because of the mobility. Ride the Lightning in its original implementation was the biggest reason why I started playing Elementalist, and I love the mobility you had with this weapon set. And the brawling style was quite fun for me for a while, but also I find dagger under sort of standard roaming around the world leveling experience becomes really brainless in its rotations. To me, that weapon set absolutely became the epitome of, alright, go into Fire Attunement, use this cooldown, go into Air Attunement, this cooldown, go into Water Attunement, do the same, and like, it became really brainless. However, I kept with it even when I first started PvPing a long time ago, very early metas, a long time ago. Dagger was a really good bruiser type spec to play in PvP. You would like run Aura Share with it, you could roam around with a really glassy 100 Blades Warrior, and it was super effective. One of the best teams during the early days, QT, used to actually run something very similar to that, and I really liked the dagger play. However, as time moved on and it got nerfed a bit more and a bit more, in PvP, when Ellie fell into like a disgustingly bad place, I started running Scepter. Scepter, I think, is a weapon that has a lot more finesse. Rather than just brainlessly going through as many of your achievements as possible, especially once Fresh Air came into the game, Scepter Focus was very much what achievement do you want when you need it. And the specific spec I played on Scepter for a long time was Scepter Dagger, but eventually Scepter Focus was Insane Glass. And the reason I did this was because Ellie was so bad in the meta, I felt the only way to have fun on the class was to do something ludicrous, something with massive glaring horrible weaknesses, but also had these insane payoffs where you could nuke, you know, 2 players down instantly in a second. And you know, actually for a while I became quite known, oh, this is Liss on his Elementalist and everyone knows he's stupidly glassy. Like, that was pretty fun, and the style was very different, and that's why I made that initial transition. Now, again, many of you know the way I've played Guild Wars 2, I've either spent a long time in PvP and then gone back to PvE. Well, after I came back to PvE, after I'd been running a lot of Scepter there, I was like, do I really want to be running dagger? So I had this moment, and there's a video on my channel where I'm suggesting to people a Scepter Focus PvE build, and this is basically from my time just coming out of PvP where I have a real hard-on for these big spikes. Now, however, I've shifted back again. This is what I'm getting at. Now that I'm running a lot of dungeons, I feel like Scepter is just not worthwhile. Dagger main hand in particular has much higher sustained DPS over the long run, specifically because of the Lightning Whip. It can cleave a lot more targets than you can ever consistently get on the Scepter, and particularly the Fire 3 on Dagger main hand is great when you're stacking against walls. And I've gone back to Dagger offhand instead of Focus, again, because really in dungeons the only utility Focus on the offhand offers you is a bit of invulnerability, but Swirling Winds. Swirling Winds can be great. There's a lot of projectile play in dungeons, and if you have Swirling Winds, you can block all these projectiles and save your team from a lot of nasty stuff. However, if you have a decent comp that employs Guardians or Mesmers who are aiming to reflect those projectiles, running Swirling Winds isn't actually worthwhile, because these players on your team will be doing massive damage if they can reflect projectiles, but your Swirling's overlapping with that and destroying the projectiles, and they don't get that massive damage. You're still mitigating what comes into your party, but you're also slowing down your damage. So it's like, why would I want to run Focus? The truth of the matter is, especially with dungeons, as much as anywhere else in the game, I swap my weapons a lot of the time. You know, specific to certain encounters, I'll swap. For example, when I'm doing a full set of dungeons during the day, and I get to Citadel or Flame Path 2, the final boss in that path is this giant crystal thing, and if you run staff on that, you can cast like a meteor shower on it and maybe an ice storm, and it will die really quickly. So why would I run Scepter, Focus, or Dagger? I'll swap to the staff. And I think many questions where people ask me what I run for my build, for my utilities and weapons in particular, the more I play this game, the less I have an answer for those people. I think you come into Guild Wars 2 with sort of a mentality that you just pick a weapon and you stick with it, but when you really get to know the game, you should just be lugging this stuff around in your inventory with you and swapping it around very actively. The experience of being, say, a Mesmer in a Ra is for utilities wise, it would be ludicrous to just stay on 3 utilities the entire time. You're constantly swapping. You're always going to stealth skills when you're in a running section, and then back to other skills once you're back to fighting. Like, that's a big part of what Guild Wars 2 is. And the devs are, even with the update to the traits, if you think about it with the feature patch, encouraging that kind of play even further through like trait swapping. And you know, I predict in 6 months time, once this trait patch is through, someone's going to ask me, what build do you run on Elementalist? I'm not going to have an answer. There's not going to be set traits. I'll be swapping those around a lot of the time. Really, you can just say, what do you use the majority of the time? And my answer now is Dagger is what I use the majority of the time. And funnily enough as well, my original argument for why I enjoyed Scepter over Dagger, because it had more finesse. Actually, in dungeons, Dagger can have quite a lot of finesse, because you are sticking in achievements now. You are staying in fire just for the might stacks, and then earth to blast in them, and then you are sort of staying in air to do as much damage as you can, but then once you've got your lightning hammer out, you're sticking in water. Like, it's much more situational. It's not brainless rotating through, even though I'm Dagger now, and that I quite enjoy. The next question is from Cam9797, who says, hey WP, would you prefer the new Mordramoth story arc to be temporary, just play for the achievement reward stuff like we saw exactly through Season 1, or for it to be an extension of the personal story, say with 2 or 3 instances every patch? I would like to have an answer onto what's going on for extension to the personal story. And I hope that the answer to that question is that we'll get a huge new campaign style thing, big sweeping new chunk of personal story that comes into the game with some kind of expansion, and living world things should exist outside of that. Now that there's a merging of living world story with pact story, and pact was decidedly personal story, I don't know how they'll deal with it. But even outside of what I just stated, I think Living World needs something more than achievements to keep track of what you did and what story happened. I think the way that the game currently keeps track of personal story progress is so good, and why don't they just add a new tab for Living World? I think a merging of the two would say a lot about ArenaNet's plans for expansions in the future. Namely, if they merge the two, that we probably won't be seeing a traditional expansion of any kind, but the longer that they don't merge the two suggests to me that maybe we will. I also wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of extension of the personal story comes by the way of a new race, as in you don't actually get more personal story on existing characters, but you do get a totally new 1 to 80 personal story for playing the Tengu when they get released, for example. And when those new races come out, surely they will have personal story, so I can't see any way for the devs to get around that. I think maybe that's when we'll first start to see them put it in. But, you know, these are actually complicated questions, really complicated questions, along the lines of, you know, adding new maps and what they're meant to be doing with world completion when they add those new maps. And these could be the reasons why the devs have been so tight-lipped about coming to a decision on an expansion, because there's a lot to discuss and a lot of meetings to be had. I mean, that's as far as we can speculate for now. Hypo 10 useless, I think that's the way it goes, says, hey WP, I've noticed in the last couple of videos, I'm only picking this question by the way because everyone was commenting on it, you have a world completion reward shining and waiting, but you won't open it. Do you want the gifts of exploration taking up your space in your inventory, or do you just like the way it shines? I just like the way it shines. That's literally it. When I got map completion on my warrior, it had been so long since I got it on my elementalist, and when I got it on my elementalist, I clicked it so quickly. I was like, whoa, that's a new icon, that's really cool, and yeah, I'm just leaving it there. I don't need to make my gift of mastery until everything else for the Bifrost is in place, right? So, screw it, I may as well just leave it there glowing for a bit, add a bit of flavour for myself, and frankly, yeah, in the videos, I think it's kind of cool to have, you know, this warrior video that's actually got that shining little icon. I think it's just a cool icon, and I don't need to click it yet, so why not? It's definitely not an inventory space thing. I'm not that strapped for space. That's actually an interesting thing that I've talked myself onto there. I am thinking of, in the future, in case many of you don't know you can do this, you can make a personal guild for yourself. Not many people use up all their guild slots, all 5 slots, but if you do have a slot for yourself, maybe consider making your own guild, of which you are the only member. You rep it for just a little while to get the influence you need, and then you can make yourself a guild bank, and then you basically get an extra bank, don't you? And if you do it even longer, you can expand that bank's treasure trove into a deep cave, I think it is. And you can get a lot more bank for yourself just by using this extra guild slot, which I think is a great idea, and maybe something that I end up doing. I just need to leave one of my existing guilds, and it's hard to pick exactly which one. And further beyond that as well, an even crazier thing that I heard a friend of mine was doing, he has 1,000 gold, and using banks from spare guilds, you can actually, in case, let's say you've got loads of gold on your account and you're scared that someone might hack your account and take it, right? What you can do is create one of these extra guilds, dump like your 1,000 gold in it, and then unrep the guild, or even better, put an alt account as the leader of that guild, and then you can leave it and you just ignore it, and it's like that money is completely sealed away and nice and safe for you. Obviously not practical if you plan on spending a lot of gold, but if you're like a big saver, maybe you want to keep it for certain investments or something, that might be something interesting to do. Anyway, I thought that was a cool idea, that there was real money out in Tyria in banks, instead of, you know, just crappy consumables and old living story items, which is generally what I've seen in the banks of most guilds I've ever been in. Next question is one of those, not really a question, just a cool idea I want to voice. WP, I have a question. Do you think ArenaNet will ever make plans to make Claw Island a playable map in the open world PvE, and not just a story map instance? That's great! Like, what's the downside here? Yes, it could be very cool. In fact, now that you mention it, what would have been a really awesome way to end Season 1? Maybe, you know, a giant attack on Lion's Arch. Historically, what did we see in the personal story happened when there was a big attack on Lion's Arch? Oh, we were all talking about Claw Island and how they're the first people that would see any attack from the sea. And perhaps, yes, Scarlet didn't attack from the sea, but that could have been written in. This could have been a thing. This would have been really cool. Season 1 of Guild Wars 2's Living World ends by adding a new permanent map to the game, and yeah, technically it was a personal story thing, but they can go back in there, add a bunch of compelling NPCs, maybe add some nice points of interest, waypoints, some merchants that sell unique stuff, maybe even make the entire island a big meta event that's got a decent daily reward, encourages people to go there consistently, adds like a portal in Bloodtide Coast that leads directly on, and maybe even a portal out in Lion's Arch somewhere. That would have been great. We would have had a new permanent map added to the game that actually tied in with the story of Season 1. That would have been so nice. As it stands, since they had that opportunity on a plate and they didn't think about it or decided not to do it, do I think they'll do it in the future? Probably not. But these are the things I think the devs should be looking at. They were very good with the personal story initially, in the most unique areas in the personal story are still explorable out in the open world. There are a few exceptions. One of the recent videos I did, I was in the underground prison in Garenhof. This is one of those rare places that only exists as personal story, and really could be just a part of the open world. What if they had made that a part of open world and given you a skill challenge down there? You know, that's another place to explore. It would have been cool. Generally, the devs have been very good, but Claw Island is a glaring exception to this, and I would have loved to have seen that become a permanent map. I think that would have been a great idea. The last question comes from Ammo Lang, who says, if we got a choice to get a fractal of something from QandA in Guild Wars 1, what would I choose? Guild Wars 1 had these things called bonus mission packs, which would take you to a random place back in time. They were very rewarding, they were designed to be solo missions, and in the scope of Guild Wars 1, this made them very cool bits of content to play. But they always featured very exciting areas. And I always thought that Guild Wars 1 should have had a bonus mission pack of the Harvest Festival, or the original moment when the Jade Sea and the Oakvale Forest were petrified and Shiro slayed the Emperor. That would have been awesome. And I actually stand by that as my answer for a fractal in Guild Wars 2. If we had a fractal where we were playing as Kurzik and Luxem forces, and like one specific player in the party was chosen to be VZ, for example, and another specific player in the party was Saint Victor, and we had Archimedes, right? That would have been so cool. You would like role play as these big heroes in like such a pivotal moment of that campaign. That would be such a great fractal. I'd love to see it. I could go on for days about fractals I'd like to see. The reason I chose this question was because that QandA stipulation really makes you think about what would be best there. And yeah, that would be very exciting to me. Anyway, there you go, guys. That was the video for today. One thing I do want to say, and that's the footage in the background. This should have gone at the start, but I didn't think about it. The footage in the background for today was the weird farm we did. Thank you so much to everybody who came out for it. We had a lot of people, I think at max. I was doing some supply infos when numbers were already dying down, and we still had like 55 to 60 people. I would say we had maybe an 80-man Zerg during the height of it. It took us a while to get the farm rolling, but what you were seeing in the footage there was a farm in Pentinent Pass that worked very similar to the old Ember farm, except it's much more difficult to keep going smooth, much easier for people to troll. But if you do get that good group of people doing it, it was actually a very profitable farm. And considering that there were no waypoints to take, there was very easy access to both a armor repair character and a merchant. it was very profitable and probably better than Frostgorge sound. I would say that I got maybe 70 champ bags in a period of an hour and a half to 2 hours. I ended the whole event with 100 bags, but that's just because it took us a while to work our way into it. And I think pretty much everyone who was there from start to finish had 100 champion bags as well. It was a lot of fun, and it was a good farm. Like, the whole idea of these events wasn't necessarily to have super profitable farms, but hey, this one was. And thank you to everyone. I got many people messaging me about the existence of this thing. Maybe we'll do it for another weird farm in the future, or we'll go do something else for next time. I haven't quite decided, but again, to reiterate for people, if you want to join on these and you can be in the footage in the background, just give me a follow on Twitter, because that's where I announce it most. You don't actually have to follow me. You could just bookmark the link I've got in the description and then you'll have it just fine. But following might be a little bit easier for you, because it will throw it up to you each time I set one up. And yeah, we just do that, and it was a lot of fun. I'd love to see you guys for the next time, and hopefully we can earn some money there too. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the video. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great evening, and I guess I will see you next time.